You ready to start?
Yes.
Okay, you're on, Rob.
Hello, I am Rob Himmelstein, president of MRJ. I know many are still signing on, but I want to be respectful of everybody's time and keep this on schedule. We are very proud to continue our webinar series with a conversation with 4 rabbinic and cantorial students. This is a sampling of our future clergy and some of the people we feel will be shaping our future, and all are extremely impressive. We have with us today Jolie Bothast, a first-year cantorial and rabbinic student at HUC Jerusalem. Jason Schwartz, a first-year rabbinic student at HUC Jerusalem. Megan Eslamboly, a second-year rabbinic student at HUC Los Angeles. And Will Brockman, a second-year cantorial student at the Debbie Friedman School of Sacred Music at the Hebrew Union College, Jewish Institute of Religion in New York. Their complete bios can be found where you registered. I'll try and put into the comments as well. We're also excited to have them to interrupt their busy schedules and give us some time today. Steve Sherman is working the magic behind the scenes, and our interviewer today is Stephen Portnoy, MRJ's immediate past present and current MRJ Executive Director. Without further delay, I'll pass it on to Steve to start the discussion. Mr. Portnoy.
Thank you, Rob. There we go. It's just waiting for the video to switch. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. We are spanning 7 time zones today, which is one of the reasons we do this on a Sunday. Otherwise, it would probably be geographically impossible. Since you have all the bios, what we have asked is each of our 4 participants to speak a little bit about why they are where they are, what they hope to accomplish, where they're going. So I will ask Jolie to begin.
Hello.
Welcome.
Thank you so much. All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Jolie Bothast. I am a first-year cantorial and rabbinic student here at Hebrew Union College, and I'm starting my journey here in Jerusalem for the year. How I got to where I am, a deep involvement in reform spaces since I was young, I think, is truly the reason why I ended up where I am. I grew up at Temple Judea in Tarzana, California, singing on the bima all the time from a very young age, helped me connect to what it means to be Jewish in a very musical way. And then about a year ago, I decided that adding rabbinic school to cantorial school would really create the future career that I aspire to have. I am only 4 months into my journey so far at Hebrew Union College. I believe that's correct. And so I love to talk a little bit about these past 4 months, especially living in Israel, and why I think it is so important that the clergy education starts in Israel. The Year in Israel program initially was not one of the reasons why I chose Hebrew Union College. However, it has been so influential. I can't imagine having gone anywhere else that did not start in Israel. It has been a little challenging, as I'm sure all of you can imagine, living here in Israel during a wartime. Things like, if any of you have visited recently, there are these things that, should I should I get onto this very overcrowded bus right now? And having that circulate through your mind it weighs on you. However, looking around at all of the Israelis continuing to live their lives joyously and to the fullest has been inspiring in a way that I will bring with me in my cantorate, in my rabbinate, in my life forever. They choose to not live in fear, and that has been really helpful. Living in a new space during a wartime, with the news just flying at you all the time, looking around and seeing people not on their phones at restaurants, talking to each other, engaging, learning, just really enjoying life has been so inspiring. I think that starting the year here in Israel, as I said earlier, has been life-changing. Us students are really able to grasp the current events of the current Israeli events in such a nuanced way that I think is really challenging to grasp back in the States. I am so excited to take everything that I've learned here in our phenomenal curriculum, specifically about Israel. We have been traveling around Israel and speaking to all walks of life to really understand this crazy place, while also really ingraining the knowledge that we really need the state of Israel. I knew that before I got here, and just being here has reaffirmed that. So it has been absolutely amazing to be here in Israel this year. I can talk briefly about why Hebrew Union College and why Reform Judaism and why I want to spend my life dedicated to growing this community and engaging with it. I think that Reform Jews walk the talk. We take the values that we teach in religious school and that we preach about on every Friday night, and we actually take it into our world to make our world a better place. I've seen it firsthand. I'm seeing it here at school already. I knew from a young age that building, for example, like I'm a Jewish educator. I've been educating in synagogue spaces and in camp spaces for a long time. Building future involved Reform Jews, you're actually building future good humans that are going to go out into the world and make it a better place. And what an incredible opportunity. So I am so looking forward to the rest of the webinar and to answering any questions. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you. And Jason, who is also first year, your impressions. Why are you there? What's going on? What do you want to do?
Hello, good evening. Thank you for having us all on this webinar. I got to Jerusalem about 4 months ago, and I've had the pleasure of studying with Jolie and with the Year in Israel staff here. It's a really, like Jolie said, it's an incredible program, and you get a great education. You get this deep insight into many challenging aspects of being Jewish and your relationship with Israel. I am originally from the Chicago area. If there's anyone on this call who is from Chicago, I grew up in a suburb called Glencoe, and I grew up at a synagogue called Am Shalom. I grew up in a very proudly Reformed family, and I loved synagogue life. I loved the traditions of my family. I loved the studying Judaism and learning Hebrew. My grandfather was a Holocaust survivor who was born in Berlin, and I grew up being very aware of that proud and painful piece of my family's history. And I continued to grow up in that space, and I continued to love studying Judaism and to love studying the Middle East and comparative religion. And so I went to college in DC, and I studied Jewish studies and Arabic, and I went to a Jesuit school, so I had this incredible comparative religion opportunity in college. And then after college, I wanted to stay in DC and work in the Middle East space. And so I worked for 5 years in DC. And I worked for the US government and for some governments not in the US, and it was wonderful. And I worked with incredible people, but I wasn't working toward the things that really mattered to me. I wasn't living a life that was directed by my Jewish values. Not that I think there was anything wrong with what I was doing. And after learning a lot in my past job, and thinking very deeply and going through a discernment process, I realized I wanted to go to rabbinical school. And I came to HUC both because I grew up in a Reform family that was very proud of its Reform heritage, and also because I believe deeply in the values of Reform Judaism and the values of progressive and liberal Judaism. If those are new terms for anyone on this call, I don't mean progressive and liberal in necessarily a political way, I mean it in a religious way. And as Reform Jews, we believe in critical thought. We believe in evidence-based argument. We believe in the evolution of tradition and faith. We believe in democracy and equality and pluralism. And at the same time, we also believe in the precious value of our Judaism, in the value of our tradition, of our Torah, of the sanctity of our people and our history. And holding these things together, this combination is very important for me personally, and also for the world. It's critical for the health of Jewish life. It's not easy being people of faith and being people of an ancient tradition in today's world, and it's doubly difficult when we're members of this minority that is so challenged and has been hurt so often and faces the violence of anti-Semitism. And so I wanted a career where I could both learn for myself and live the values that I aspire to, and learn how to translate and teach our values in a modern context. I think for those of us who are trying to pass on Judaism and contribute to the health of the Jewish community, it's not easy selling this difficult life and this complicated faith that we've all many of us were born into it, but for both the people that were born into the Jewish family and the people who weren't, we've all chosen to make this a central part of our values and a central piece of our life. And in progressive Judaism and Reform Judaism, we have this framework that has been worked over by generations of progressive Jews, by rabbis and leaders from the Reform movement, and also from the conservative movement, from the Reconstructionist movement, from other strands of liberal Judaism. And we can use this framework to say, not only is there still a place for Judaism and faith and tradition in today's world, in our tradition, we have the lessons that show us, especially in today's world, how to live lives of justice, how to live lives of peace, how to live lives of respect and thought and study and love. So that was a very important piece to me. And then from a broader perspective, liberal progressive Judaism is so important to me because around the world, we have all these crazy rising voices of extremism. And often these voices speak with or pretend to speak with the voice of religious authority. And in progressive Judaism, we have the counter argument to that. We say, no, you do not have a monopoly on religion in the public sphere. In fact, when you make calls to hatred or when you incite to violence, you are doing things that are antithetical to our tradition as Jews. And we are educated and committed Jews, and we have the authority to speak to people who try to pretend like they are more religious, even when in reality they are not living their values any more fully than we are. So that is the personal and ethical and religious journey that I went on to come here. And I also don't want to pass myself off as an expert. I am 4 months into rabbinical school, and it's absolutely incredible, but we have 4.5 years to go, and that's also daunting. So Stephen, it seems like we're doing the Q&A at the end, but if there's anything you want me to say now or wait till later, I'm happy to do so.
Okay, we're going to get to the Q&A, so thank you for that. And now with the, shall we say, hindsight of 2 years into the journey, Megan, why don't we start with you?
Thank you so much, Stephen. Good morning, evening, afternoon to everybody. When I was asked to be on this panel, thinking about the future of Reform Judaism, I thought we should start with probably the past and the present first. I grew up in Southern California, and I've always been a Jew balancing two worlds. I come from an Iranian, Persian, Jewish family, so my heritage is steeped in Mizrahi and Sephardic traditions. However, I grew up outside of the Los Angeles Iranian Jewish bubble and lived in the Palm Desert area, Palm Springs. And when my family chose to move out there, we joined a Reform Ashkenazi synagogue. And so I grew up with Sephardic Mizrahi tradition, but lived in Ashkenazi Jewish community. And so I get this beautiful dichotomy of rich traditions from all over the world and all different kinds of ancient groups of Judaism. And growing up, I was very involved in my temple community, Temple Sinai of Palm Desert. It was a way for my family to connect with other families in the area. And this is nothing new for immigrant groups. Jews are always joining Jewish communities wherever they move to, and finding spaces to pray and to evolve their religious life as they settle into a new space. I think that there are three turning points in my life that brought me to the path of becoming a rabbi. The first was my bat mitzvah, where I, not to toot my own horn, but I really crushed it at the age of 13. And after that, my childhood rabbi said, oh, you know, one day maybe Megan's going to take my job, as a joke. But I mean, look at where we are now. So, you know, crazier things have happened. I think my first trip to Israel was also extremely influential in my life. When I was 16, I took a youth group trip, and that was a moment where I got to connect with the land, the people, the culture, and influential there. And also the first time that I saw a female rabbi leading a service, Rabbi Lindy Resnick, when I was in college at the University of Redlands. I remember seeing her on the bima and being like, this is 21st century Judaism, like a queer woman leading a service, teaching a congregation. You know, I could do that. So from that moment on, my path to rabbinical school led me in the direction of Israel. Before I started rabbinical school, I studied at the University of Haifa in the international school. It was a wonderful opportunity to live in Israel in a mixed city and immerse myself in the culture of the country before taking on the big leagues of Jerusalem. At the University of Haifa, I had the opportunity also to study Judaism with people who are not Jewish and understand where Judaism sits in other Abrahamic faiths in their knowledge and dialogue, engaging in cross-cultural dialogue, which was really important. And then last year, last June, the one before that, 2023, Will and I in the second year cohort moved to Jerusalem. And as the first years have mentioned, it's really a city of life-changing experience. It's a city that changes you. And I learned in my time there, if you give Jerusalem love, it will give you love back, and doors will open, and you will have experiences there that cannot be replicated in any other space. I think Jerusalem, in my experience, was really the center of the world. Living right in the middle of the Middle East, you have cultures coming over from the north, the south, the east, the west. There's just a fusion of life and energy that you can feel in such a place of spiritual significance. It's palpable. And I think being there for the last year, amidst the turmoil, but seeing the beauty of everyday life was something that you can't walk away from and not be changed. There's so much to explore in Jerusalem. You just have to know where to look. And it sounds like our first years are finding that out as well. But living in Israel really allowed me to connect with my Jewish experience that I felt like I was missing in LA in my small Southern California bubble. One of the proudest achievements when I was living in Israel was that I attended over 15 different minyans of all different denominations. And I think it was just something to go that shows the comfort in which I felt joining places that were more conservative or orthodox of other streams of Judaism and being welcomed by the Jerusalemites. It was really something else. And I look back at that with great fondness. For me, my experience living in Israel on October 7th was really a wake-up call to the type of leader that I wanted to be in the Jewish community, and gave me an opportunity when faced with the choice of whether to return to the United States, as many people in our cohort chose to do, or stay in Israel. Will and I are two students who chose to stay, and I'm speaking for myself now, but I really felt that this was a time for me to rededicate myself to the commitment of serving the Jewish community by staying in Israel and bearing witness to the atrocities, but also the real beauty and resilience of the Israeli people. These are the stories that I brought back with me to my work here in California. So presently, my current experiences, even though I'm about 5 or 6 months out of Israel, I'm still adjusting to American life. It takes some time to resettle after you've lived in such a crazy experience, and trying to relay that to people who haven't shared that has been something I've been working on, and figuring out how to share my story and the narrative of what the students of Hebrew Union College experienced in the last year. The second year in Hebrew Union College is also full of a new curriculum where our academics right now are being modified to fit our ever-changing roles as clergy. They're restructuring our curriculum in a way to make us prepared and able to adapt to the current situation, speaking about Israel, what kind of Hebrew and Midrash and things like what studies are applicable to rabbis today, as well as a focus on pastoral care, comfort, and creating spaces of worship for a wide range of Jews. And the most important part, probably for many of our second years, is our student pulpits. Right now, students in the rabbinical program in Los Angeles and the cantorial program in New York have been placed in pulpits where there are either not rabbis or cantors leading these communities on a regular basis. So we are serving as our internships in different places around the US. I'm serving Congregation Beth Aaron's in Billings, Montana. For a Southern California girl like me, it's a total change in my life. Different than Israel, though, of course. But it's really been a validating experience for me. I think that the student pulpit affirms our ability as second years, showing us that we can lead a congregation even if there is so much more to learn. Having the High Holy Day experience where you're kind of just thrown up onto the bima and expected, to lead 4 services in the span of 10 days is a real trial by fire. But we all survived and we lived to tell the tale, and it really has increased my confidence and my decision towards working as a congregational rabbi. That's my past and my present. I'm happy to speak on the future of Reform Judaism, but I also am aware of time. What do we think, Stephen? Should I save it for a, is there a question?
We'll get into a Q&A right after our next student, Will.
Hi, everyone. It's so great to be speaking with you. I'm speaking to you today from Sag Harbor, New York. I'm speaking from my student pulpit at Temple Addis Israel here in Sag Harbor on the east end of Long Island. I resonate with so much of what Megan said. We're good friends and we have a lot of things in common. But what I wanted to talk a little bit about was what it means to be called. What does it mean to be called to walk this path? What does it mean to be called to walk this journey? And I think that my story can serve it as an example, perhaps for those of you that are on this call, or perhaps you know someone who's not on this call that you can talk to, because there is no one path to the cantorate or to the rabbinate. And HUC is such a strong institution that one of HUC's strengths is that we welcome students from a myriad of paths, from a myriad of backgrounds, and transform from wherever we were before then to future clergy people on this path. So before I came to HUC, I earned my Bachelor of Fine Arts in Acting from NYU. I worked professionally for a number of years as an actor. And then I had a life-changing year and a half when I moved to Toronto to study at the University of Toronto and pursued a Master of Arts in Performance Studies, in which I studied Israeli music, but was not particularly satisfied with what I was doing. And finding myself in the theoretical framework of grad school, of potentially going on to a doctorate, it didn't sit with my soul in a way that I found fulfilling. At the time when I was living in Toronto, I was a congregant, I was a member at Holy Blossom Temple. And I remember very distinctly one Shabbat hearing the senior cantor, Cantor David Rosen, sing with the cantor emeritus, Cantor Benny Meissner. And something within me said, I want to do that. That's really cool. I want to do that. But there was this voice in my head that said, no, who are you? And it reminds me of a verse from Parshat Shmot, in which we find one of the most famous episodes in the entire Torah, when God speaks to Moses out of the burning bush. Vayomer Moshe El Ha-Elohim Mi Anochi. And Moses said to God, who am I? Who am I that I should go to Pharaoh? And that's what stayed with me for several months until later that year, in about December, when I went to Israel for the first time. Much like Megan, my Israel experience was a very, very powerful experience for me. I went on birthright. I went there for the first time, and I had a very, very powerful experience at the Kotel, in which I went up to the wall with no preconceived notions. We had a wonderful, wonderful tour guide. His name was Yoram. And he guided us and said, don't go with any expectations. Let the experience be what the experience is going to be in this moment. Be present for it. If this is your first time at the wall, let it be whatever it's going to be. And I found myself drawn to writing a patek, to writing a note to place in the cracks of the wall, without any preconceived notions of what I was going to write. And the words that I wrote stuck with me to this day. I wrote, please show me the path by which I can do the most good in the world. And I remember as clear as day, placing that patek, placing that note in the cracks of the wall, and hearing a voice in my head saying, you need to become a cantor. And I went back to Toronto from Israel. I met with the senior cantor, David Rosen, who very kindly and very generously helped me in a very brief and truncated process of interviewing and auditioning for HUC, which was successful and led me to the path that I'm on now. Like Megan said, we had a very eventful year last year, both of us living through October 7th in Jerusalem. Was one of the most difficult days, I think, of many of our lives. The following weeks were some of the most transformative of our lives. Like Megan said, both of us chose to remain in Jerusalem. And those weeks, I think, really solidified and strengthened my commitment to the Jewish people and why I'm on this journey in the first place. And it was actually last weekend, I believe, I had a chance to take a break from my student pulpit here after the Chagim and return to Toronto, seeing many familiar faces at Holy Blossom and seeing one of my friends, Rebecca, who I actually was in my MA program with, my theater program with. And it was a very enlightening time, because sometimes it's only through the eyes of other people that we can see ourselves clearly. And she said something to me that really stuck with me, that the reason that I got involved in theater in the first place was because I was concerned and interested in the human condition. Good theater, I believe, seeks verisimilitude, the appearance of being real, seeks to understand why we are the way we are, seeks to answer life's big questions, seeks to provide. In Book 10 of the Republic, Plato says that people go to the theater for two reasons: for entertainment and instruction. And when worship is good theater, as my teacher Elena Arian puts it, We go to the synagogue for many of the same reasons. We seek out meaning in life. We seek out these answers to life's big questions. We seek out community. We seek out a sense of togetherness in other people. And that is one of the many reasons why Jewish community is so important, and strengthening Jewish community in these very difficult times is extraordinarily important, because together we are stronger. And lastly, I'd just like to close in saying there are so many ways that you can be called to the rabbinate or the cantorate. My story is just one of many examples. I highly encourage anyone who is thinking about it, thinking about either the rabbinate or the cantorate, or like Jolie, both, contact the admissions department at HUC, take a tour, talk with someone on a Zoom, attend a practicum if you're interested in the cantorial school, attend Tefillah with us in person, see what we do, see who we are. Ask us any questions you may have, because most of us, if not all of us, are more than willing to talk with you. And our Jewish communities, our Reformed Jewish communities, are stronger when our leadership reflects the people that we serve, who come from a diverse array of backgrounds, and our leadership should reflect that. So I thank you for your time, and I look forward to answering any questions that you may have.
Wow, I am pretty close to speechless, and those who know me will find that to be a very odd position that I find myself in. So let's jump into this a little bit. I don't know if you had seen, but about 2 weeks ago, HUC and JIR and MRJ announced a strategic partnership. It's with a program called Ritually Rooted. And all of you have given an indication of why you have chosen Jason, in your case, the rabbinate, Megan, also the rabbinate, Jolie, rabbinate and cantorate, and Will, the cantorate. So we know kind of where you're going, but with this ritually rooted, what do you want to say to college students who are not deeply involved in Jewish life, let's say, and what is your message to them? So let's go quickly in the order that we started with, and we started with Jolie.
So, sorry, just to clarify the question, you're asking us to speak on ritual and how that relates to engaging, for example, college students that don't feel very connected?
Basically, yes. I wouldn't pin it down to ritual. That's the name of the program, Ritually Rooted. But how do we reach out to people who have not had a deep Jewish connection, or who may have had that deep Jewish connection and aren't following it?
Absolutely. I think the phrase meeting people where they are has always really spoken to me when it comes to engaging with people. For example, this past year, I spent as the education intern at my synagogue at Temple Judea. And we had a lot of families that were disillusioned with the traditional religious school. And so, you know, they prioritized sports and dance because parents didn't love going to synagogue and didn't love going to religious school. And so they just chose to prioritize different things. And so what our synagogue did, and I had the great privilege of working really hard on this project, was to create an alternative. So we created a summer camp and a winter camp. Enrollment for the camp exploded. Kids got the opportunity to learn with a teacher for 4 to 5 hours a day. And then they got to be in Jewish community. They got to go to the swimming pool. They got to play Gaga. They got to do Israeli dancing. So while we were also teaching them the religious school curriculum, we were also teaching them what it means to be in Jewish community in a way that not sure if Sunday morning religious school accomplishes in the same way. I'm really looking forward to, I'm spending 3 weeks flying back to Los Angeles in December. And I'm going to be spending a week of that back at the synagogue and teaching at the winter camp, just because it was so beautiful. And the most amazing part about it was that enrollment for the summer camp also increased enrollment in the weekly religious school. So I know that you had asked about college students. I think that we could probably have a similar approach, understanding where people's priorities are right now, not wish they were any different. Meet people where they are and show them first how great it is, how great we all know it is to be in Jewish community. I'm not really sure if I have the answer yet on how to do that. And it sounds like your program, Ritually Rooted, is going to be doing some really, really exciting things. And I'm so looking forward to hearing more about the program and about all of its successes.
Thank you. Jason, same question, if I may.
I first want to say that I do not have Julie's experience. I have never worked as a Jewish educator. And so I'm thinking about my experience of being in college and reconnecting with Judaism. And I think one of the difficult parts of trying to program or trying to market Judaism to college students is, again, I say this not as someone who has worked as a Jewish professional. This is how it seems to me from an outside perspective. I think sometimes Jewish organizations get caught up in the fear of losing Jewish students, and in that fear, they shift the focus they shift the messaging from, like Julie said, look how valuable this is to where you are in your lives, and instead they say, look how much you have to do this. Look at how much we're grasping at the heritage that is slipping away, and the obligation is on you to keep this going. And I think when I think about Judaism, I think about it as being this resource that I carry around with me as a Jew, and not. I do feel some responsibility to my family, to the generations of past Jews, but I wouldn't be a rabbinical student if I didn't do this because I think it just benefited me to be Jewish, and I was the beneficiary of this heritage that is just at our fingertips as Jews. And so I think if I was talking to college students, I would say you are all living your lives and you're experiencing the challenges that are universal to both Jews and non-Jews, and you're just doing your best. And the Judaism that I love is one that doesn't take away time from the other areas of your life you're trying to grow. It contributes and empowers you and provides you family and lessons and connection that makes it easier and makes you more successful and more supported. So that's my relatively vague answer because I do not have the benefit of having actually done this work.
Honestly, I don't think there is a single answer. And I will tell you that when I connect with congregations and their men's clubs or brotherhoods, usually the first question is something like, how do we engage the millennials? Megan, same question.
All right. I think that this is such a central question to my Jewish experience because, believe it or not, in college, I was not involved in any Jewish organizations because for me, it was a time of individual ritual and spiritual growth on the personal level. I think, like people have mentioned, you're involved in so many clubs and extracurriculars. Judaism for me during those 4 years of college was a time of introspection and figuring out how am I building practices and traditions that I want to take forward. It was incredibly pertinent in my college career. And I think because I made the choice to work on it on the individual level, when I was ready to come into community and join spaces, I had an understanding of how Judaism played a role in my life and the values that I wanted to commit myself to, and then share that with the community. College students are actually very spiritual people. My undergraduate thesis in religious studies was spirituality's role in higher education. I noticed a trend in a lot of my friends at university saying, well, I'm not religious, I'm actually spiritual. So I did a deep dive into what does that really mean? What are people looking for? And while we desire community, I also think that higher education itself plays a role in facilitating that as a place where we open our minds to new possibilities and build relationships with people who live in different places. And it is the key. Higher education is a key to creating more compassionate, equitable, tolerant members of society. So I personally believe that you kind of need to let young adults in this pivotal time in their life come to religion of their own accord, because those people that during that time, I think when you choose to join religious groups and it's a personal choice, it's much more powerful than your parent forcing you to join the conversion class or the confirmation class, sorry. And I do appreciate my mother driving me to confirmation class every day. She's on the Zoom, so I had to put the shout out there. But during that time when I chose to be involved in Judaism and I chose to work at my temple synagogue as my first job, those are the pivotal moments that have shaped me, because as Will mentions, it's the calling that comes when you take space to figure it out for yourself. So that's kind of where I'm putting that there.
Okay, so that brings us to Will.
Thank you, Stephen. What I'm so excited for in this pilot year of Virtually Rooted is for a chance for both college students and the mentors that they're going to be connected with to have a chance to build meaningful and lasting relationships, engaging in Jewish wisdom and the tachlis of their day-to-day lives. Because what we do, I believe, really well as Reformed Jews, and we can continue to improve on, is taking the wisdom, thousands of years of wisdom, of Jewish wisdom from our tradition, and meeting us where we are today. As Jolie said, what a beautiful turn of phrase, meeting people where they are. And that is what we seek to do as Reformed Jews, is to take our tradition and bring it into 2024 and beyond. And this is what we need to do on college campuses. This is a very difficult time to be a university student when so many people are shouting anti-Israel rhetoric and speaking anti-Semitic slurs and the encampments and all of these things that are giving Jewish students a difficult time on campus. What we need to do is have programs like Richly Rooted and others like it so that we can give Jewish students the knowledge, the tools, and the skills to be leaders as students within their own student communities, so that other Jewish students on campus who might not be as readily involved feel, oh, there's a voice that speaks for me. This is a peer of mine who has these skills. I should gravitate towards them and perhaps see what this community is all about and see why they're getting so much strength and so much ruach and so much wisdom from our ancient tradition. And one last thing that I'd also like to suggest during this pilot year of Virtually Rooted is that if we want to engage the younger generation, what we really, really need to do is listen to them. What we need to do is listen to their needs, because I think if we ask and listen, they will tell us. And that is perhaps the key to keeping Judaism alive and engaged for the next generation of Jews.
Thank you. Along with meeting people where they are, one of the other things that I've always said when I get inquiries from men's clubs or brotherhoods is, when you're thinking of doing programs and they involve people who are not in your, shall we say, age cohort, is something that was told to me probably about 10 years ago at a URJ biennial. And it's a phrase that I like to use, not for us, without us. It's a simple phrase, but it's got a lot of thought behind it. So, before the next question, I want to read to you what one of our actually executive council members wrote. It's not a question, I just want to read this. Thank you all for sharing your stories. Very impressive. I was in Israel over the summer, and you all brought me back to that experience and feeling. It definitely was transformational and life-changing, to say the least. I'm very happy that you all represent the future of the reform movement, which I echo those sentiments. So next question, and we'll do the round robin on this. And oh, I wish we had another hour because there are so many good questions. There are two that are very similar in thread. Is HUC doing an adequate job, a good job, in preparing you for a new media environment, Zoom, Facebook, events, competing streaming options, getting members' attention? How do we get that through in congregational life and social action? That's sort of a lot packed in that question, and I hope that Jolie has an answer for us.
What I will say is that rabbinic and cantorial school are 5 years long, and I'm only 4 months in. So although I don't think I have the answer, I think maybe the answer lies down the line, since we're spending most of the first year on our own clergy for self-formation. What I will say is, actually just last week, we were engaging in an interesting idea in talking about a minion and what a minion means. And someone brought up this idea of, what does it mean to create a minion on Zoom, as we all were faced with this issue over our experience with COVID. And so while answers were not said or created in that conversation, it was part of the conversation. And I think that that really shows that in our clergy education, we are engaging in these, we're engaging in how to bring congregational life and how to bring Judaism into this very odd media-centric world that we are both blessed and cursed to be living in. Yeah.
Okay. And Jason.
I'm going to start by saying yes. Like Jolie said, we personally haven't had the, social media marketing elective or whatever yet, but the one day HUC gives a lot of professional training, and Megan and Will can probably talk a lot more about how you get prepared to actually start working with the congregation. I think the question in a broad sense is about, is HUC preparing rabbis for the challenges that are facing congregations today from a practical perspective? And I think the answer is yes. We study, I so wish that my friends and family and the people who have no interest in being rabbis could come and meet our professors and the people who we're studying with, because we study with these incredible Torah scholars and educators and program management experts and a whole range of people that do a really good job. And they also all face the very difficult question of, what does it mean to educate Reform rabbis? Because no matter what they're going to do, they're going to get criticism. They're going to get criticized from the more traditional side of why are Reform rabbis learning all this mishigas about Zoom and about social justice or whatever. They should only be studying texts and Mishnah and Gemara and whatnot. And from the other side, they're going to get criticized as why are they studying so much text? They should be learning how to organize their congregations and make sure that attendance is rising and whatnot. So in my limited experience, they teach very thoughtfully, and they teach a broad range of subjects, which all combine to make us very prepared, hopefully, for the challenges we're going to face as clergy people.
Oh, thank you. Who shall we go next? Megan.
Okay, in the question of media literacy, I have to say, it's not Judaism's strong suit. We're people of a book, we're not the people of television. So we are, I think, adapting to that as time progresses, and as these new cohorts that are coming into Hebrew Union College Jewish Institute of Religion are showing a skew of younger participants and stuff. And as the tech generation of millennials, Gen Z, whatever we are here, we come with our own knowledge of how, we're the YouTube generation. We grew up on this stuff. So we're finding ways to embed it in our learning. And I do have to say that Hebrew Union College is making an effort to figure out how to bring in media literacy and information into our education. There are so many new learning opportunities and programs opening up. I believe there's going to be a Zoom option for getting your degree with the university, which will open the door for Jews who can't make the move to New York or Los Angeles. Actually, when we were in October of last year and the war had just broken out, I do have to commend the university on figuring out how we could stay engaged in school, having half of the cohort in Israel or Europe and half of the cohort in Los Angeles. They figured out how to continue our curriculum in a way that we were able to pick back up when we all returned in January. And I also have noticed that stateside, we have a lot of opportunities to turn in assignments and create projects that involve media. For example, my Ketuvim final next month, where we're studying the writings and the Megillot, our final is to turn in a podcast with our Hevruta partner, which I think is much more entertaining than writing a paper, and something that I could share with other people and disperse in a manner that will reach a larger audience than per se my paper on the Megillah that I choose to write about. So I think that HUC is coming with the times, and also the student demographic who is literate is bringing our knowledge into this realm and helping to bring Judaism up to the 21st century.
Great. I encourage you to share your podcast with us when it's ready to go public.
For sure.
Stephen, this is one of the great questions of our time. How do we engage with technology that exists? And what I will say, HUC is very strong in our stateside campuses especially, is our experiential learning. Our student pulpits, as Megan said before, are some of our greatest learning opportunities, and they are strengthened by the work that we do in our classes. I can say that the work that we do, especially in the Debbie Friedman School of Sacred Music, is so focused on the practical material skills that we need as cantors to serve our communities. And then when we go to those communities, the vast majority of us, if not all of us, exist in hybrid spaces where we're live streaming our services, and it's always a balancing act. How do you make the service exist in such a way that it's accessible and meaningful for the people that are watching from their devices, whether it's they're joining a Zoom or watching a live stream on YouTube, or it's on JBS in Central Synagogue's case, while still making it a Hamish shul experience for the people who have chosen to come in person. That is the balancing act of our time, perhaps. And there is no one right answer, and it's going to be a different answer for every single synagogue. And that is the beauty of our HUC experience, getting different pulpits every year and serving different communities. And that's why we are encouraged to engage in more than one internship during our 4 years in the stateside campuses. Just yesterday, I helped co-teach a Torah study with my mentor, Rabbi Dan Geffen at our temple here in Sag Harbor. And it is entirely impacted by modern technology. It's not just the fact that we have Zoom, it's the fact that we use resources like Sefaria, that most people now have access to a wealth of Jewish texts that could take years and thousands of dollars to amass. But we have the gift of technology like Sefaria, where not only do we have these texts right in front of us, we have the commentaries, we have the ability to look up the words that are in front of us in the Hebrew, understand the shoresh, the root of these words, understand the binyan, the conjugation of these words, understand more detailed Hebrew. And I think that if we use technology to our advantage and use it in the way that I believe it should be used for good and for education and for the betterment of our society, we can not only work with it, but have it work for us in ways that strengthen our community, educate our community, and give our communities the tools that they need to not only engage with us, but to feel stronger in their own Jewish identity. And that's one of the advantages that we do have in the modern era.
Thank you. Actually, these webinars that we've been doing originated out of COVID when our brotherhoods and men's clubs were unable to meet in person. The thought was, what could we do to help them? And I think our first one back at that time was with the Consul General of Germany in New York about how Germany was fighting anti-Semitism. And that seems such a long time ago, but we've had people like, maybe you've met MK Rabbi Gilad Kariv. We've done webinars with him. So let me ask you all a question, and if you just, we have about 2 minutes left, but there's so much more. Are you all okay with extending for a little bit? Because the next question I have is really a rather tough one in terms of the thought process. So I expect you would take a little time to answer. Do any of you have to leave?
I have time to stay on for about one more question, and then I will have to leave, but this next one is fine.
Okay. So if you do have to leave, that's okay. Again, we'll start with Jolie. Is the Torah a metaphor? Can you define God? And what are your thoughts about humanistic and radical Judaism?
You're really ending us with the stumper right now. Gosh.
That's what I thought when I looked at that question that came in.
Wow.
Yeah, at this point, anybody that wants to jump in with a thought, because I do want to try and be respectful of time, but I think this one is sort of an interesting question.
Can you repeat the question?
Sure. Is the Torah a metaphor? Can you define God? And what are your thoughts about humanistic and radical Judaism?
Stephen, when you asked us if we could stay on for another question, you didn't say it was going to be questions that can take 20 years to answer.
That is, if there is an answer.
I'm happy to jump in. I'm happy to start us off with some thoughts, knowing that my thoughts are not the answer, but they are my answer. The Torah is not a metaphor, in my opinion. The Torah is a record of our people's relationship with the divine. Whether the events in the Torah literally happened or not are not the most important part of the Torah, in my opinion. They are the lessons that we derive from it. They are the teachings, they are the traditions, they are the ways of life that have been established, because everything that happens within Judaism comes from Torah. Torah is the root of what makes us a people, and everything that people engage with that is often referred to as cultural Judaism, right, is something that stems from Torah. It's the reason that we have lox and cream cheese on bagels instead of a bacon, egg, and cheese for Kiddush on a Saturday. Everything that we engage with comes from Torah. So it is not a metaphor in that regard, but whether you literally believe that the events of the Torah happened are not the most important part of engaging with Torah, in my opinion. It's the learning that we do from it, and it's the living and the way that we live because Torah exists. Can I define God? That is something that I believe we all have to do for our own selves. I think the answer for me is more that God defines me. I don't define God. God defines me. Baruch she'amar v'haya ha'olam. He's the one who spoke and the world was created, and he created all of us b'tselem Elohim. So it's all of our duties here in this human manifestation in this lifetime that we're in to engage in acts of creation, which are b'tselem Elohim, to create the world as we wish to see it, to create the world as God intended it to be. My personal definition that I think is most readily accessible for my own self that I use to define God as Ein Sof is the infinite, that everything that we put onto God, any characteristic that we attempt to define God with, is just a small fraction of who God really is. God is so much more than our human minds can comprehend. God is so much greater than we can ever understand in this human lifetime. And God is all that is. My relationship with God is my driving force behind why I do this work. So off of that, what are my thoughts on humanistic Judaism? It's not a choice that I personally engage with, but if it's something that is a meaningful practice to someone else, I'm more than willing to meet someone where they are. If their relationship with Judaism and Jewish community doesn't involve God, they are welcome in our communities. Many of our congregants don't believe in God, and I don't believe that that should ever be a barrier for them engaging with Jewish community, for them engaging with Judaism, and especially for them engaging with Reform Judaism, as we profess faith that is bounded by reason and faith that exists in the modern era in that way. And I believe that Jewish community is so important that we should not be turning people away for whether they believe the right thing or express the right set of faith, because we are not a dogmatic religion in that way. We are a people. And yeah, God's cool. That's all I have to say about God.
Anybody else want to tackle this?
I'd love to jump in quickly.
Great.
When I was deciding whether or not I wanted to go to cantorial school, I really struggled with these questions that have been presented. And for a while, they were the barrier because I didn't have the answer. I said, I can't go to school yet. I don't know what my relationship with God is yet. I don't know what my relationship is with the Torah yet. I don't know. And therefore I can't go to school. And so for a lot of years, I rejected the idea of going and becoming clergy. And I remember sitting on the couch in my rabbi's office and sharing this with him. And he said to me, Jolie, the point of going to school is not to already have the answers. It's to engage in the questions for the rest of your life. And that was the day that finally I opened an application to come to school. That was so inspiring to me, this idea that being Jewish is all about not having the answers. Jacob wrestles with God in the Torah. We are a people of wrestling with these ideas. We're not supposed to have the answer. Is Torah a metaphor, or did everything that is said actually happen, or something in between? I don't actually think it matters. Similar to what Will said, whether or not you find it to be metaphor or truth, you find meaning in it. And it puts you in a pew in the synagogue. And I think that is what matters. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm
I-
also, oh, I'm
Please,
sorry.
go ahead. No, please.
I was going to jump in and say that both Will and Jolie gave beautiful answers to that question. I am not sidestepping the question, but I wanted to say that one of the most important parts of Reform Judaism is pluralism. And that lesson becomes so clear to us in Israel. The parts of Israeli society that we have the biggest problems with, we don't necessarily have a problem with them because they have a different belief than us. Our problem often comes from the fact that they don't believe anybody else can be right, that they are the only ones who are able to really pursue truth because they exclusively have the correct understanding. As Reform Jews, we are pluralist. We welcome different ideas. In the history of Judaism, the richness of Judaism comes from interpretation and dialectics and disagreements. And I just wanted to throw that in on top of the other things.
Megan, do you want to jump in, or you want to pass on this?
I don't think I could have said it better than my colleagues, to be honest. And I'm really touched in hearing all of them speak on behalf of the students of Hebrew Union College. I feel empowered just hearing the stories of this new cohort. And I'm kol hakavod, really, guys. So I'm going to leave it with their thoughts.
Okay, I must admit I'm a little surprised that there were no references to Buber and I thou in the response to that. I will tell you very quickly, and maybe this will give you some insight into my personal definition of God. Was walking out of the subway here in New York, coming to the top of the stairs on a beautiful spring day, and a little breeze went by. And without thinking about it, it came to me that that was the breath of God. So on that note, and I am now going to go in the order I see you on my screen. Last comments. And we're going to begin with Megan.
Something which I really wanted to share before the webinar ended was, where do I see the future of Reform Judaism? I think that's on all of our minds right now. And the future of Reform Judaism is going to be a diverse place. I'm going to speak a little bit from my background and experience as a Reform Persian Jewish American in Los Angeles. And what I've witnessed here is that there is a shift in the culture of Mizrahi and Sephardic Jews right now. In Los Angeles, Iranian Jews are the driving force in keeping synagogues open. But right now, we're witnessing a shift in younger, more Americanized, maybe second generation Persian Jews, Mizrahi Jews from the Middle East and Sephardic as well, families who are joining Reform synagogues. But unfortunately, many of them are losing their religious traditions in the process. For example, I grew up going to an Ashkenazi synagogue, so when I do attend a Sephardic shul, I don't know the Sephardic additions to things, and I feel like that is somewhere that the Reform movement should be working towards, and we should be asking ourselves what we can be doing as leaders of Reform communities to open our doors to people of different ancestral groups. I think that these rituals that come from other ancestral Jewish groups need to be explored as a tool for education, not only for Ashkenazi Jews maybe to learn about the rich culture of the Middle East and of Sephardic Jews, but also for Sephardic and Mizrahi Jews to be educated as well in what Reform Judaism is. because in places outside of Europe, there were not these denominations of Judaism. So many Persian Jews don't really understand what Reform Judaism is. And so when I'm sitting with my family and teaching them maybe the meaning on why we keep the Rosh Hashanah Seder as Sephardic practices, they're like, wow, I've lived my whole life without ever knowing why we do these things the way we do them. And oh, I thought Reform Judaism was this and that, without having a real grasp. So I think that my hope is to see more students from Sephardic and Mizrahi backgrounds choose to enter the rabbinate, especially women, because the Reform movement provides women of these backgrounds a place where we can be religious leaders and be supported by a community which has been reasonably cut off for us throughout history. I'm really in a unique position as a female Persian rabbinical student because there are only 4 other clergy members who have been ordained in my situation. I'll make top 5, which is a beautiful thing. And I'll be the second or third person to come from 2 Persian Mizrahi families. So I hope that others will follow and that we can be leaders in this new revolution of Sephardic and Mizrahi Jews joining the Reform and progressive spaces. And that's the message I wanted to close with.
Thank you. Will.
In closing, I just wanted to offer a practice that was taught to me by one of my teachers in Jerusalem, who I hope Jolie and Jason you have, is Rabbi Debbie Shuahayim, who taught me and asked me, what is one verse from our tradition? What is one verse from the Tanakh that you want to take with you and have on your heart? And I didn't speak a great deal about my relationship with Israel during this call, but it is one of the most important things to me. And my heart is in the East, and I'm wishing Jolie and Jason, both of you, safety, peace, and shalom on all of Israel soon and in our days. When she asked me this question back in May, the verse that came to me after spending a year in Jerusalem, a year in Israel, a very difficult year, as we all know, was the 6th verse of the 122nd Psalm, Shalu Shalom Yerushalayim Yishlayu Ohavayich. Pray for the peace of Jerusalem. May those who love you be at peace. And it wasn't until returning to the United States that I realized that the verse that I really need on my heart and has been on my heart for the past several months, being here in the United States, is 2 verses later. And I think exemplifies what it means to engage with Jewish peoplehood and what it means to engage with Jewish community. The 8th verse of that psalm reads, L'man achai v're'ai, adabra na shalom bach. For the sake of my kin and my friends, I pray for your well-being. And that's what I wanted to leave us with.
Thank you. Jolie.
I think that the last things that I want to say on this webinar is mainly that I look around at the 14 other people in my cohort here in Israel with me, and I feel so much hope for the future. I can only assume that when I get back stateside that I will feel exactly the same way about all of the other years, but I'm having this opportunity right now to learn really closely with 14 other individuals, Jason being one of them. And to me, watching their deep commitment to building future Jewish communities is what is keeping my faith in everything that is going on in the world. That HUC is actually building strong leaders, and I'm witnessing it. And so as the world gets scarier and things get crazier, holding on to the fact that there are so many people dedicating their lives to furthering Reform Judaism helps me sleep at night. So I just want to say thank you sincerely to Jason and Megan and Will for sharing everything that you have shared today and furthering this feeling that I'm having.
Thank you. last but not least, Jason.
What Megan said was really beautiful, and it was making me think about one of the beautiful parts of being in Israel and studying Reform Judaism is that Israeli Reform communities look very different from American Reform communities. Reform Judaism in Israel is much younger, it's much more diverse, and it's in some ways still growing and shaping and being creative, because there are a lot of places that are figuring out what does their Reform Judaism look like. And I think that that's going to be very important for both the Reform community in Israel and the Reform community in the US as we go forward. In the US, we're going to see a lot of changes, hopefully, over the next 20, 30, 40, 50 years. We're going to, everybody on this call is a beneficiary of all the incredible work done by Reform leaders that came before us, excuse me, and who built all these incredible Reform institutions and these Reform cultures. But we have to be willing to experiment. We have to be willing to change. We have to be willing to step outside of our comfort zone, because the only way to adapt to these changes is to be open to seeing new traditions and to be learning new ways of being Jewish. And by doing that, we're going to both see the value of our past Reform traditions and open up our synagogues to a whole new world of practice and of people and of just successful strategies and ideas.
Again, I find myself in this strange position of not really having words. So let me just say that this webinar was sort of billed as the 4 faces of the future. And if we're looking at the 4 faces of the future, I think we have a very bright future. So I want to thank each and every one of you. I wish you shalom, and I would say, please stay in touch. These are very important conversations. So again, thank you, thank you, thank you, and thank you. And now we give you back your day.